Yeah, sorry guys. Okay, so yeah, what we have seen is like how do we implement the state management globally within the application when there are n number of components, and how do you share the data between the components? How we'll be having a global store. From there, how you're going to retrieve the data into individual components or independent components where there is no relation. So that is what we have seen there. Okay, so we have used the concept of combination of the use context at the same time use reducer. So if you remember, like, I mean, what we started with is we took an application, we just started with only with the use context, and the limitation what we see is reading the data is the fine. But what if like I want to update the data back into the context? So that is not getting updated back to the components there, right? So if we see that, what we have seen, light redux. Okay, what do you mean by light redux? This is again a good interview question. People will ask you, what do you mean by light redux? At the same time, they may also ask you something called why people are going with only Redux library state management. Is React is not providing it? It is providing by using the combination of context and the reducer. So if you see what we have done is under your component one, I think component two we have done, right? Under your component two, whenever I want to update the age, what we have done is handle update age. We simply said like data dot age is equal to something called as 50. Is updating there? No, right? I mean, it is not updating on the. It is not updating onto the global context so that like it will be shared with all the other components. That is not happening. Okay, so that is the reason what we have done is then we started making use of the reducer. So we know that how do we create a reducer, how do we add the action items and all. Under your common.js, if you see, we created the reducer, the guy who actually takes care of the actions. So based on the state and action, he is going to return, and that is how the process goes. So now we combine the reducer along with the context. That is where we see that now anytime I'm updating the age, it is getting updated to every other component. Why the reason? Because it is not getting updated into the component memory. Instead, it is updating in the context memory. And the same data is getting updated to getting retrieved or getting binded to every other component. Okay. So this is what we have discussed here. So any questions you have with this? I mean, hope everybody got a chance to go through the code what we have added. And based on that, please put on the questions. Tejashwini, mention it in notes in interview question. Tejashwini, I think like I asked someone to track all the interview questions, right? I'll just mention it, and anyone can take a, just open the running notes and you can just add it. Okay, Shatish, provider component worked with without default in your code, but I'm getting the error default missed. Do you have any idea why I'm getting the error? Okay, when I go to the provider component, if you see, I have not kept the default. That is the reason in your app.jsx, when I'm importing it, I kept it with the braces. Now you might have missed the braces. That is the reason it is expecting it has to be a default. Right, Satish? You try to keep it within the brace, then you will be getting rid of that error. Otherwise, make it as a default. So, any questions with the previous or yesterday's discussion? Hope everybody got a chance to go through the previous code. I mean, yesterday's code. All good? Anyone? Everyone is good with the discussion yesterday? I'll add some more changes to that, but before going to this. Okay, now let us go into this contact. If you see here, the reducer, what we have added is Swati. In real time, do we need to separate initial state and reducer method into separate files? Exactly, Swati. In real time, what happens is store will be a separate file. Okay, and initial state. Because what happens is right now, if you go into the common.js, if you see, I have kept only one initial state, and this initial state is being used inside your provider component, right? I mean, from where actually it is getting started. When you go into the real time, what happens is we will be having multiple stores. Okay, multiple stores is the place where we actually store the data. Multiple initial stores, initial states, because one stage, one or else, like you can say that multiple providers or multiple context memories, you can say. Okay, we'll be having multiple context memory. So that under this, for example, user credentials, I will be storing in one context. I will say user, not user, I will say something called as product details into one context. I will say something called as session info into one context. We are not combining all the context memory. It is not like now if you go into your app.jsx, you see we have given just one provider who is taking care of storing all the data. But in general, we don't do that. Okay, right now we have only user details. This is the guy who's taking care. But when you go to a bigger application, imagine where you have thousands of components in one single project. And when thousands of components are getting into one single project, now imagine how the state management is going to happen. So in order to manage that state, we will be having multiple context memory. We will be segregating this. User credentials will be into one context memory, product details into one context memory, session info into one context memory. So in that case, you'll be creating multiple providers. There you will say provider, under that another provider, under that another provider. Now you have the components. Now those components is capable of accessing all those uh, context data. Now, when we are creating multiple initial states, multiple stores, multiple reducers, etc. and all. So now what we do is we create a separate file for all the stores into one single file, all the initial states into one single file, all the reducers into one single file. So that is how we generally do in our real time. That means multiple states and single reducer methods. No, reducers also will be differentiated, right? Because reducer always works based on the state only. If you go for where we have added that, I think in your provider, right? So when you go to the provider, you see when I'm using the use reducer, I am defining the state and the reducer itself. I'm not saying that one state and same reducer, different states and same reducer. No, right? In fact, like reducers also will be having multiple reducers. Is that fine, Swati? Is everyone good? Can I go forward? Yes, no? What if initial states are data from API? Initial states are data from API. How does that matters? Now, if you see, when I'm using the reducer, our expectation is I need to give the initial state object. That's it. Now, if your API itself is responding back to this guy, now you do your API call here at line number 4. Do that API call and you're going to update the, whatever the response you're going to get, that is where you're going to get this, you're going to give this initial state. But honestly, that is never a real time scenario. Initial state of your store is never a response from your API. There are cases, initial state always goes with whatever the object structure you go. You may even go with something called as empty object also. But later you will be updating the store with the data or response what you get from your API. But initially we never, at least with my experience, what I have, initially we never start with something called as, okay, this is the response what I got from the API. No, this is the initial state. No, it never happened. It will be always going with, you can just, for example, this initial state is there. You can just go with this empty object itself. You can go with empty object itself. Later, on some action, you're getting a response from the API. Now, once you get that response, now you add it to the initial state, or now you add it to the reducer. Clear? Okay. Now, Pallavi, is light redux recommended for large project state management? That is what it is not recommended, Pallavi. Okay, in fact, like that is what my next topic, which is your Redux state management library. So why the reason people go with the Redux state management library, which is a third party library? So because now when you go with I mean, right now you have three components sharing the data within the application, it is a bit easy. But when you go with the bigger, I mean, assume like hundreds or thousands of components within your application, this solution is not a feasible. I mean, using the get context and your reducer combination is not a right solution, or right solution for the if you have bigger or number of components. Okay, that is where we will be going with the Redux state management. So what Redux will do is he is introducing something called as slices, and he is using some predefined methods or so and so, using which you can do this state management in more simpler way. To get that done, that is the reason we go with the Redux state management. Okay, yes, I mean, to just answer your question, it is not recommended to go with this type of state management when it is a bigger n number of uh, components you have. Okay. Ajitesh, you are getting this error. Cannot read properties of undefined reading age at component 1. It's very simple. That indicates that you're not getting. When you go into your component 1, where is that? When you go into your component 1, when I'm saying the data dot age, if data itself is not getting, then it is an issue, right? Implies you need to console what is this data. Just console see what is this data. For sure, it is going to be undefined. Now, when it is undefined, how it is getting undefined? User data is going to have a problem. So here, either you might be returning user data, but it has to be user data dot state. Just console this. What is the, I mean, we have created this custom hook, right? Get the user data. So console this user data also. Let us see what is the object you're getting. Ajitesh, you please do that and let me know if you still have an issue. You can share your screen. What are the main drawbacks if we use this solution for the complex project? There is, I mean, the complexity, Satish. Now, when I go with something called as, if you go with plain JavaScript, okay, forget about this React, etc. and all. Assume like I'm going with the plain JavaScript and I want to do the DOM operations, document.query selector, document.getElement by ID, or document dot so and so. So we are going to do those type of methods or dot inner HTML, etc. We are going to use those type of core JavaScript methods in order to handle the DOM operations, right? Then why the reason jQuery we are using? So under jQuery, instead of going with those basic core methods, it has given some simplified methods like get class name, okay, dot class name, dollar of element. So the jQuery, what it has done is it has simplified the methods. Now, if I ask you a question, boss, instead of going with the jQuery, can you handle the DOM operations just by using only the only using the predefined JavaScript methods? You can still do that. I'm not saying that it is impossible. But to make it more simpler, we are going with the jQuery. The same thing happens over here. I'm not saying that this Redux state management cannot solve the problem for you. But if it is bigger components, it is not so easy for us. Now you see here I have added this, okay, custom hooks is fine. But if you see, when I'm going with this reducer, under this reducer, hundreds of options we are going to have it. Hundreds of cases we need to write, saying that, okay, for this case, you need to do this. For this case, you need to do this. So not so easily maintainable code you're going to have it. Okay, the challenging part is not so easily. Here, if you see, we are taking two topics, combining them. Now you are calling it as a state management. We are using the get context here. We are taking the reducers here. Combination of these two, we are achieving the solution. But when you go with the Redux type of state management, what it will do is it will combine internally all those, and it is giving some simple methods here like use selector, Anyway, we'll talk about them. So there is some useful or simple predefined methods we have. With that, we can get this state management more simpler way. That's it. We are not saying that with this combination of cut context and reducer we cannot do for the complex projects. We can, but it's a lengthier code, not a easily maintainable code. Did that answer your question, Satish? Ganesh, in real time, Redux only we use. Yes, there are something called as Redux also we have, Zookeeper we have. I mean, there are a lot of state management libraries we have. We can go for that, but yeah, among all the state management we have, Redux is more popular and more proven, better proven. Okay, now getting this error. Read properties of undefined. That is okay. Do you want to share your screen, Ajitesh? Are you okay to share your screen? Yes. Okay. I just made you as a co-host. Please go ahead and sharing your screen. I'm stopping my screen share. Okay. Okay. It is saying that cannot read properties of undefined reading user. Where is that? Reading state, right? So where you are state, where you are doing that should be under common.js.
I'm doing here.
Okay, so can you go on the top? User is in common JS file. Okay, here itself it is getting an error, line number 13.
Yes, sir.
Okay, can you console just user after line number 12, right? Just console, just user, not there. Don't combine the string with object. Create a separate console, please. On the top, after line number 12. Yeah. Use context, user details context. User details context. Are you importing it? Can you scroll? Okay, here it is coming. Okay, that's fine. Save it and check on it. Scroll. Can you clear it and clear this, please? Reload. Okay, go on the top. So it is also coming as undefined, right? Okay, can you come back? So this context itself is empty. Are we going to create context like that at line number 9? When you're creating the context, how you're going to create the context? Okay, create context. Okay, directly we create the context. Okay, that's fine. Use context. Okay, can you show me your provider? Can you scroll up? Here you are not at all using the states, right? Why you are not using the reducers?
No, sir. Initially, I was trying.
Okay, you're just trying with empty. Okay, if that is the case, right? Now, what is the initial state? Can you go back to your initial state, please? Okay, initial state is username so and so, right? In that case, you directly has to get the user details. Export use context user details. You are returning the user. Yeah, it should come there. Okay, can you go back, please, to your provider? Provider, you're saying like user details context. But what is user details context? Okay. From your common, it is recommended you make it as uppercase. User details context is there, right? Okay. And line number 1, yeah, and go to the common JS file, please. line number 12. Okay. Now, can you go back to the what do you say? Got it?
Yes.
That's it.
Thanks.
Because like there you are using it as a component, right? You are using the structure as a component, then obviously component rule is it has to start with uppercase. Provider itself is indirectly part of component. Okay. Is that fine?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, okay. I'm sharing my screen back. Okay, so coming back to this discussion, custom hooks are missing. Okay, that's fine. I mean, actually, he's still in that initial state is not used. Okay, so coming back to this, what we have done is when I click on update age, it is directly updating it to 50. Why the reason it is directly updating it to 50? Because under the action, I mean, here I'm not taking any of user what actually he is providing. I'm simply directly doing every time as age 50. Now what I do is small change I will do under your component 2. Where is that? Under your component 2, when I'm saying this dispatcher, what actually the dispatcher has to go? He has to go with the type. What type of action we are going to do? Say something called as increment. And what is the okay, right now we are not passing any payload. Otherwise, we have to even pass the payload also. I mean, what is the data which has to be updated? That is what we need to pass. But right now, when I say increment or else increment, okay, or else increment will do, and payload will be, or else instead of increment, I will say change and payload will be username is getting updated to something called as crush, and the age will be updated to something called as 30. Assume this is the change what I'm passing. Whenever we do this guy, automatically the thing will be coming to your reducer. Reducer action is going to come here. Now I will say something called a switch action dot type. Right? Now the case is change. When the user is saying like a change, I need to say return triple dot state, comma. Now, what is your payload? I say action dot payload. This is an object, so action dot payload will be an object like this, but I can't say this object directly. I can't merge this guy like this. In that case, I need to say username colon action dot payload dot username. Whatever the username we are coming from there, that I'm going to take, and age also will be action dot payload dot age. Okay, what I'm doing is to the existing state, and this guy I will make it as default. If nothing is matching, then you go for this. Okay, so in case of switch, whenever there is a excuse me, whenever there is a change action type is coming, I'm going to modify that with whatever the username and age is going to come. Now let us do the change here. Now once I reload the page, okay, whenever I click on this update age, you see here age is getting updated to 30. Did I made it as 30 only? Did we made it as 30? Yes. Then why the username is not getting updated? Username. What is the initial state? It is username only, right? USERNAME. Updating the age to Chris. Why it is payload? Okay, dispatcher is payload. Okay, that is fine. But when we come to the common.js, under your reducer state, whatever the existing state we have, action dot payload dot username user. I missed the spelling. Okay, once we reload the page, now once I click on update age, why so? Haven't I saved it? Update age. What is missing? Still type error is there. Okay. Where is the type? Variable assignment in the same line. Which line? I already allowed you guys to unmute. You can
Yeah,
speak.
username, line connection. Go there, back
Line
line.
number. Line number.
27, here. Username, USC name. R is missing, not there. In variable. Proper
Okay,
text.
this guy. Okay, the key.
Key, yes.
Okay, sorry. Okay, now once I click on update, now you see here, age is also getting updated, name is also getting updated. What if I want to do the same in my component 2 also, or this component 3 also, I would like to do the same. So what is the very first thing we need to do? First thing is you need to get the dispatcher. How you are going to get the dispatcher? Dispatcher is equal to, we already added one of the custom hook here. To get the dispatcher, use user dispatcher. Right? Now where this use user dispatcher is coming, it is again coming from our custom. Now how you're going to dispatch this? For example, here I will say, I will use another button, say something called as increment. I'm just doing only the increment here. So in case of your increment, what happens here? Handle button on click is handle button click. Let's define this guy. Function handle button click. This guy comes with event. Okay, now what he's going to do, he simply say dispatcher, I will say something called as increment. Now I'm changing the action. And for this, I'm not passing the payload. I just need to pass what is the type here. It has to be an object. And under that object, I need to say what is the type, right? And okay, if you're not catching the event, that's fine. Dispatcher is increment. Now it will be going to the reducer, right? Let us add another case here. When the case is increment, okay, you need to return whatever the existing state you have to return that, and the age. The age will be state dot age plus 1, right? Whatever the existing state you have to keep it as it is. Age has to be updated with whatever the existing age you have, just make it as plus 1. That's it. Now, when I do this, let's come back here, reload the page. Now, when I say update age, it is getting updated to Chris and all. Every other component is getting updated. When I click on increment, I'm updating this, and every other component is getting updated. So, all like this, whatever the actions you have, based on that, you will be adding the case, like add the product details, add item into the cart, remove item into the cart, okay, update the total. Like this, you will be adding n number of actions or switch cases. Based on that, you're going to handle this. Okay. Is everyone good up to here, guys? Everyone good? Can I go with the next topic, which is your Redux? Yes, no. Can I go forward, guys? Everyone is good up to here. Yes, no. I don't see any answer from you guys. All good? I see the response from Satish and Amrish. Others? No questions. Very good. Okay, let us close all this. The reason, can we perform any calculation in reducer? Obviously, you can do, right? So what is stopping us to not to put any calculation? Once you are under this case, right, Pallavi? Under this case, you do whatever you want. The final thing is you have to update the state based on the current action. That's it. Now, if you want to do some a plus 1 or 10 plus 1, any calculation, any operation you want to perform under this, you can do any type of things. And these all things will be part of this particular case. Clear, Pallavi? In our case, there is nothing. We're just directly returning the new state value. Finally, you have to return the state. But before that, you want to do anything, like you want to hit an API, get the data. Later, it has to go. You can do anything you wanted. Am I clear, Pallavi? Any more questions? Anyone? All good? So actually, right, this topic of Redux, we have to take it later. I mean, maybe after completing the, what do you say, routing concepts. And there are some small topics are there, like using the memo, lazy loading. Those topics are there. After that, I need to do. But the reason why I'm doing the Redux now is to just reducer. Now, how we are going to do the same guy? How we are going to do the same guy by using the, yeah. The reason why I'm talking the Redux here is so that you can compare how we were doing with the combination of context and reducer, how it is going, and now you're going to make use of the Redux, how it is changing. Okay, that is the reason I'm starting with the Redux. I won't make this complete application to be Redux state because anyway, in future, when we go with our React project, right? At that time, I'm going to discuss about this, what do you say, this Redux state management, much more better way we will be implementing. But right now, at least we'll see like how do we start with this Redux and all. Okay. Now, before going with this, let us close all this. Okay. Now, let us go into our running notes. Jan 28. Okay. So, what we are going to talk is Redux. Okay. So what is Redux? Nowadays, when you go into the market, we have something called as Redux and Redux Toolkit. Okay, there are two things which are available. One is your Redux state management and Redux toolkit also. What is the difference here? These two things have come from one guy itself. The guy who actually developed this Redux. I mean, it is nothing like one different organization is supporting Redux or one company has developed this Redux state management and another guy has developed the Redux toolkit. No. Redux and Redux Toolkit are being developed by the Redux team itself. And there is a dedicated web page for them, redux.org. Okay, so this is the dedicated web page. If you see what actually Redux is It is a JavaScript library for predictable and maintaining global state management. Okay, it is a library, it is a JavaScript library. It is never saying like I'm TypeScript. It is never saying that I'm the library only for the React. I'm not saying that I'll be only for the Angular also. In order to maintain the state of any web application which is developed on JavaScript, we can just simply go with the Redux state management. We're not saying that it's only for the React. For React also, we can make use of the Redux, but it is a just an open library. A lot of people think that Redux is part of your React JS. No, Redux is a complete third-party JavaScript library. Okay, we can say that a third-party JavaScript library for predictable and maintainable global state here. Now, why they have developed this Redux and why they have developed this Redux toolkit? So, obviously, Redux is a core JS library to maintain state within web application, whereas Redux toolkit, we also say something called as RTK, shortcut for this Redux toolkit. What actually this guy is, it is a wrapper on the top of Redux library to make things simple while implementing Redux state management, in a web application. RTK internally also uses Redux core features. Okay, so what actually we are saying is Redux is actually a core JavaScript library. Actual state management is there, whereas RTK is a new flavor or a wrapper on the top of your existing Redux library itself. Okay, on the top of your Redux library, they're actually adding some flavor or wrapper on the top of it to make the things more simpler. You know, in case of Redux, what happens is we are going to have some reducers and actions as a separate part. Whereas coming to the Redux toolkit, he has come up with one of the new concept which we call it as slices, where we call the combination of action and reducers. We call that guy. Anyway, I will show you the architecture also, how it is being defined. But yeah, it's simple thing. What we have is Redux is the core. On the top, they have come up with something called as Redux Toolkit, which is a wrapper on the top of existing Redux to make the thing simple. That's it. The main advantage of going with Redux is simply to implement the state management in any web application. We go with the Redux Toolkit, which is latest been introduced. Are we clear? Okay, so both the applications, both Redux and RTK, Redux Toolkit, purpose and use, both Redux and RTK purpose and use is we need to write more code if it's Redux library, whereas in RTK it's a wrapper will mostly take care of basic things by default. So with lesser code, we achieve state management. With lesser code, we achieve state management. That's it. Okay, in Redux, we need to define actions and reducers as separate functionality, whereas in RTK Redux Toolkit we combine both as a slice. Okay, this is very important to understand what actually the slice is. Okay, we also need to understand terminology or components being used in Redux. I mean, what actually the Redux terminologies or Redux components are. Component doesn't mean that our functionality components, guys. Okay, I'm saying like, what are the predefined things in your Redux library? So there is something called as action. There is something called as reducers. There is something called as view or UI. Okay, there is something called as a store, we call it as. There is something called as dispatches or selected or dispatches, we can simply say. So these are the predefined components. We will be keep on discussing about this. Okay. Now let us see how the architecture in Redux is there. Now how it is different from Redux with Redux Toolkit. Anyway, while we are implementing practically, I'm not only Redux, we will be directly talking about the Redux Toolkit because that is what we needed. But at least in the architecture, let us see the difference between the Redux and the Redux Toolkit. Okay. Now I have some questions. Narendra, if we use any other third party, logic is going to be same. Yes, that is going to be same, Narendra. As I said, right? When you go into state management libraries, okay, when you go into state management libraries, there are n number of state management libraries. Redux Toolkit is one. Okay, Recoil is the one. Jotai is the one. Mobex is the one. So like this, there are n number of zoo stand. This is also one of the popular. So zoo stand is the one. So like this, there are n number of state management libraries we have. Among all this, Redux Toolkit is more popular. That's it. Now, as you mentioned, internal logic of, I mean, why the reason we are going with the state management, guys? Okay, let us say paint. So why the reason we are going with the state management here? Boss, we have one of the application. Okay, under that application, I have something called as a header component. I have something called as a left component. I have something called as say some footer component like this. I have some separate product details component. Under that, there is something called child components like this. Now, this is what you have in a single web app. The state management is I would like to create a store or a place, store or a place to store data. I want to keep the data here so that instead of, I mean, whenever these guys want to share the data, header will be going to the store and get the data. These guy will go and get the data. These guy will go and get the data. These guy will go and get the data. The intention of going with the state management is I will create one place to manage the state and every other component can go there and get the data. That is what happening in your component 1, component 2, and component 3. We have created another previous example, right? When they want the data, they were going with the context memory and going to get the data. In the same way, I want to create a place where they will go there and they're going to get the data. Internal logic is going to be same. The logic of how the cart will be added, how the logic will be implemented, that is going to be same. The way we implement, it is going to be different. If I use Redux, it is a different way. If I use Redux Toolkit, it's a different way. If I use ZooStand, it will be a different way. If I use Coil, it will be different. The way they implement is going to be different because these all are from the different organization. RTK is different organization. ZooStand is a different organization. Zotai is a different organization. Mobix is a different organization. Recall, I mean, these all are from the different organization. That is the reason the way they implement might be different. Or else forget about the state management. You go with your libraries, your Angular and your React. Both are doing the same. Both are achieving the UI with component based only. The only difference is the way they implement is different, but internal logic is going to be same. Okay. Ganesh, are we using Redux in Angular? Any web application where you want to manage the state. We are not saying, now you tell me, is it is mandatory that I need to use Redux in your React? No, right? No one said that in your React 100% you need to go with the Redux. It is the state manager, make the thing simple, make the thing simple. That is the reason we are opting for the Redux here. In the same way, in your Angular, if there is a requirement to manage the state, obviously we'll be going with Redux. Okay, so it's all like there is nothing like a mandatory that here we have to use. It's all your requirement says, but no one is stopping. If you say that, can I use Redux in Angular? Yes. Answer is yes for that. Okay, but are we using Redux in Angular? Depends on the project, depends on your requirement. Okay, sir, it will be helpful if you show example with Redux and the same with Redux tool. It is not at all useful, Swati. Again, right? I mean, I can try for that, but it's like anyway, we will be always using the Redux toolkit only. In my experience of this much, we have never gone for what do you say? What do you say? Redux, pure Redux without using the RTK. But yeah, I will try to get that example also. Okay, if you really want the difference, right? I'll try to create that. Can I use Redux without RTK? Obviously. Vice versa will not be useful, Pallavi. Now, if you ask me a question, can I use JavaScript without jQuery? Yes. The reason why I'm always comparing with the jQuery is to simply differentiate. If you ask me a question, can I use only plain JavaScript without using the jQuery? Obviously, yes, right? But if you ask me a question, can I use JavaScript without using jQuery? That is completely independent. Sorry. Yeah. Without using JavaScript, can I use jQuery? No, internally it itself is a JavaScript. Right? The same thing happens. Redux is the library what they have created. Later, what they thought is, boss, it is taking too much of coding. Now they have added a wrapper on the top of it. They called it as a RTK. Swati, in interview, they won't ask how Redux works. Never. Because like you need to understand the Redux state. With my experience, I have never seen an application which is only using the Redux. When we already have the best one. Because we are never saying that the things which cannot Redux do, Redux toolkit is doing. The things which can be done by the RTK, Redux can't do that because Redux toolkit is a wrapper on the top of your Redux. So obviously, when you have the interview questions, it will be on the top RTK. Okay, Netaji, this RTK data will be there in browser. Okay, you tell me when I'm coming into this application, forget about RTK. When I'm saying that Raj 20 is there, Raj name is there, 20 is there, when I'm updating, data is getting updated. You tell me, is where it is storing? Is it not from the browser? Any data what you give within the web application is part of the browser memory, right? Now, under the browser memory, is it is temporary or permanent, then it is a different part. The same thing happens in your RTK also. You go with any state management, they are going to make use of the browser temporary memory only. They are not creating or they are not going with any physical data storage there. They always will be using the browser memory. Okay. Swati, in all real-time projects use only Redux toolkit. With my experience in these many years, I have never seen a project which is only using Redux. Swati, I have seen that the time before the Redux toolkit has not come. The time after Redux Toolkit has come, everybody starts making use of only RTK. Ganesh, Redux is optional to React JS developer or is it mandatory to learn? Again, I'm telling you, Ganesh, that is where you're not understanding the soul. The intention of going with the Redux is to manage the state management in your web application. If you say that in my web application, state management is not there, or if you say that the state management now in our application, could we able to manage the state or not? Yes, I could able to manage the state. You see, when I'm updating, it is getting the data being shared between the components. That is working super fine. Why the reason you needed Redux? Without Redux, I could able to achieve it. So we are not saying that it is mandatory to use the state management library into your application, which is your Redux. But what we are saying is to do the better state management when your application is growing, when your application is very much bigger. Okay, it is growing. It is like thousands of components. Imagine a place where you are using application where you are using Amazon or Flipkart, where you have multiple things. Okay, for example, if I go with something called as Flipkart. Okay, when you go to this Flipkart guy, okay, now I'm not logging in. I go with one of the products. If you see here, you agree that something is not right. What happened? Do you really need a login? Electronics. Am I? Okay. For example, this is the product. I'm opening this product. Okay. If I click on add to cart. Okay. So in the same way, I say add item. If you see here, this is the product which is getting added. Okay. If you go for say some products, okay, this is the product what I wanted. And if I click on add to bag, okay, I need to specify the size. I say add to bag.